So thank you everyone for joining today. This is a capacity building event that the SENSEI project and Belesco and Factor 4 are organizing for Belgian stakeholders, and we're actually quite happy to be doing this. Today you will have a view, and of course, as it is recorded for the ones that see it a bit later, of the key results that we have produced in the past couple of years and how they can be used to help set up a pay-for-performance scheme market in Belgium in this example. So today, for an intro, I'll present the pay-for-performance model that we have developed in SENSEI and how this can be used to boost investments in energy efficiency. As an introduction, yes, my name is Philippos Anagnostopoulos. I'm the coordinator of the SENSEI project on behalf of the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy. As this presentation is directed to stakeholders that are very familiar with the ESCO system, I'll skip essentially the intro. I believe it's quite well known. And I'll present a little bit of the motivation for the SENSEI project, how it fits in the EU agenda. Then the main concept, which is pay for performance, the idea that underpins all that, which is advanced monitoring and verification. And then I will spend a bit more time looking at the model we have created for pay for performance schemes, and also offer an example of how this could take place. And lastly, I will finish with some very quick remarks on 5 very actionable steps for setting up such a scheme. So to summarize SENSEI, what we're doing is that we investigate the use for pay-for-performance schemes for mainly, as we have found out, 3 things. One is to aggregate retrofit projects. The second is to improve the effectiveness of existing subsidy programs. And third, to reward energy efficiency as an energy resource and as a service to the grid. And this will become a bit more apparent in the following slides. Now, the European Commission, when it spelled out their innovation wave, mentioned pay for performance in that they can, and I read, scale up market incentives such as pay for performance, public support schemes, to attract private intermediaries and aggregators. That's what member states can be doing. It also identified that this can be done under the existing Article 7, now Article 8 of the Energy Efficiency Directive, which are the existing energy efficiency obligation schemes. Now, this was in October of 2020. And a few months ago, in the context of Repower EU, the European Commission, under the EU Safe Energy communication, reiterated this support for pay-for-performance schemes, saying that it will examine additional ways to trigger further private investments, for example, through mortgage portfolio standards or pay-for-performance schemes. So clearly, this is something that has received at least some attention within the EC and will be supported and rolled out further across member states through projects such as SENSEI and activities from the private sector. Now, to state what pay for performance is, very briefly and basically, is that pay for performance is that payments for energy efficiency must be based on measured savings. So essentially, P4P, it's an innovative approach to financing energy efficiency projects. What we can do with that is, first of all, improve existing subsidy schemes for energy efficiency that have been until now based on this pre-assumed or deemed savings. And that can be done by replacing one-off payments with more periodic payments that are proportional to the measured energy savings. Now, these metered savings are estimated using more advanced measurement and verification techniques that must be previously agreed upon by all parties participating in the program. Another thing that pay for performance allows us to do is to aggregate smaller projects into portfolios of buildings. And this can help attract investments from private funds that need to invest in bigger projects and to also have an improved risk management strategy. And of course, within the portfolio, some of the financiers can opt for more risky or less risky portfolios or segments of those portfolios. Lastly, and very importantly, what P4P allows us to do is to recognize energy efficiency as a demand-side energy resource. And it does this by helping us quantify the benefits that it has for the energy system. So once we know what is the benefit for TSOs, then we can, for example, then we can have a cash flow generated by these benefiting parties. All this has really come about because we had some advancements in measurement and verification. In the early 1990s, and we find the definition, yeah, the Rocky Mountain Institute defined MNV 2.0 as, and I read, the increasing granularity of available energy consumption data and the enabling of automated monitoring and verification methods that continuously analyze the data and provide early, accurate, and valuable insights to various stakeholders about energy saving estimates. So we have this technological enabler that allow us to modernize energy efficiency markets and also to create more innovative mechanisms to deliver energy efficiency. What this means eventually is that we might need to revise some of our policies and some of our standardized approaches that relate to the estimation of energy savings. Now, key methods that can be used by stakeholders that participate here or at large is option C of IPMVP. CalTrack as well in the US has proved extremely useful and is open source, but the SENSEI project as well has developed this open source toolkit called Insight that allows for advanced monitoring and verification and contributes to this suite of efforts. And now that we have seen very briefly about advanced MNV, let's look at the model that the same project wishes to suggest of how pay-for-performance schemes could take place. Now we will stay here for a couple of minutes and I'll guide you through it. Now on the left-hand side of the column, you see the various finance providers. And on the right-hand side, this is the system for exploiting the potential for energy efficiency that is trapped within buildings. The various blue arrows indicate the upfront investments. And then the orange arrows indicate the periodic payments. So these are financial flows. Then we have also the green arrows, which indicate flows of data. When we say flows of data, we mean flows from advanced MNV. A very central entity in the system is the energy efficiency aggregator. And for the purposes of this presentation, we talk about energy efficiency, not demand response, even though under other models this could be combined. For the time being, let's look at it only as an energy efficiency aggregator. So what this entity does is that it's bundling together individual projects of energy efficiency, for example, from small residential units into larger portfolios, and then links them with ESCOs, secures financing through the entities on the left, and that are looking to finance these projects. And then the circle goes through the activities of the aggregator. Very important is where the funding comes from. So we have public authorities that are providing energy efficiency programs or subsidizing them. TSOs, DSOs, power system operators that are or will be in the future interested to use demand-side resources as for the grid, for the stability of the grid. And also, of course, financial institutions that expect more long-term returns on their investment through investing in a market that previously wasn't accessible to them. So the right-hand side box, we look at the various financial flows, the blue arrows, that through the aggregator are channeled to ESCOs that have the more technical expertise to implement energy efficiency measures in buildings as they deem appropriate. And of course, they're going to be paid based on the savings that these measures achieve as measured through advanced monitoring and verification. Then, based on these estimates of savings, the building owners are paying into the aggregator, and then the aggregator redistributes the funds to the ESCOs to reward for the work that has been done, and to whomever supplied the funding, for example, to financial institutions. It's quite important to note that this is a program that is not very likely to emerge on its own bottom up. It requires both an enabling legal framework and enabling market conditions, and those are usually supported by more of a top-down initiator of the program, and that takes the place of a public authority. So now we're looking at the arrow on the top, the market facilitator. Now, its objective is to facilitate the creation of these energy efficiency programs that are based on pay for performance. And it does so by analyzing the various conditions of the market, proposing adaptations to the regulatory framework where needed, helps to define, for example, minimum standards, set the various enabling rules, for example, on procurements, and also the right infrastructure. Then we also need to see what are the benefits for the various financiers. For public funds, essentially, we have more certainty and effectiveness of the public subsidies, and we can direct better where they go and evaluate our programs much better. For the power system operators, we already mentioned that they can use demand-side measures for the stability of the grid to avoid congestion problems or to avoid very costly upgrades of existing infrastructure. And this is often called the non-wires alternatives. And of course, savings from these programs can be counted towards their energy efficiency obligations. And lastly, the benefits for financial institutions is the possibility to invest in aggregated portfolios of projects that they wouldn't usually touch because of the very small volumes. And this aggregation, of course, needs to be mentioned that helps manage the risk and also meet the demands of financial institutions for lower administrative costs, also due diligence, standardization, and so on. So essentially, the aggregator here allows big market segment to be financed in ways that it wasn't possible before. So let's run through this a bit quickly because we don't have much time. What has been presented now is really only one of several options that can be available when building a pay-for-performance programs. For every member state, for every market, more concrete specifications will need to be decided in consultation with involved stakeholders. And then, of course, some adjustments to the regulatory environment might need to take place. I will very quickly mention an example of how such a system could take place and look at how energy efficiency could be offered as a demand-side energy resource. So let's take a power system operator, for example, a DSO, that wants to reduce energy demand either across the grid or in specific areas of the grid where you have more congestion problems. Then this DSO will issue a tender for energy efficiency aggregators. And since we lack this entity at the moment, the place could be taken by very large ESCOs. That could be a temporary solution to reduce the overall energy demand from the grid or from a specific area of the distribution grid. The aggregator that will win has a winning contract that can go with it to a financial institution and gain the necessary funding to undertake the first investments. Then the aggregator can analyze the data from the customers that are connected to this DSO, identify where are the bottlenecks, identify where are the biggest potential for energy savings, and go and target those building users, building owners, building users, to make the necessary upgrades. The ones that are interested can sign an agreement with the aggregator, and then the aggregator can assign an ESCO to specific buildings to make the necessary upgrades. The ESCO will receive the funding that has arrived from the financial institutions upfront, and then based on the effectiveness of the installed measures, the ESCO is going to be paid back by the aggregator. Now, the aggregator will receive its funding in an agreed price of kilowatt hours saved from the DSO. So here we see the aggregator facilitating financial and data flows between the DSO, ESCOs, financial institutions, setting the agreements with building owners, and so on. So it really does have a very central role. Now, to end this presentation, I would like to propose a 5-step approach on how pay-for-performance schemes could be set up in the EU. The first one is commitment. So here we need to recognize that energy efficiency is an energy resource, and we need to recognize this at a high level. We need to secure commitments from regulatory actors, from TSOs, DSOs, to pilot energy efficiency programs that are based on pay for performance and meter savings. Second is facilitation. So here we have to designate a competent managing authority, and it could be an energy agency or an entity from the ministry that oversees and supports the co-design and execution of these pilots, and also helps to define minimum standards, enabling rules, provide the right infrastructure, platforms, and so on. Third one, extremely important, is advanced monitoring and verification. Here we will need to develop, or more easily adopt, an open and transparent methodology for metered savings. And here we can use, of course, Caltrack that has a very good track record, Insight, or another system that might be more suited to the specificities of the market. Fourth is procurement. And here it's quite important because we need to issue tenders for the various energy efficiency projects that will adopt this pay-for-performance approach, and that they will also need to have a compensation structure that is based on meter savings. Additionally, it must be said that here, since this will be, let's say, a first pilot, we need to have more favorable conditions to secure the involvement of the necessary market actors, and even have some predictability through guarantees or other financial and technical support. And lastly, we need to evaluate how we did and then repeat. So we will be gathering insights, know-how from the first pilots. We need to be conducting capacity building activities to strengthen the role of the various market actors. And then, of course, repeating this piloting with more improved approaches and refinements, increasing our capacities, what went well, and maybe adjusting certain things, for example, the payment structures. Now, this will conclude the introductory presentation. We found that, as mentioned, monitoring and verification has been extremely important in setting up what is now called pay for performance. There is a framework under which we can start setting up pay for performance schemes in Europe. Of course, this will need to be tailored to the specific circumstances in consultation with stakeholders. And this is a process, for example, that we can be doing in Belgium quite effectively, as it seems. And there is a 5-step approach for suggesting how this can be achieved. That's all from me. This is the consortium that has been collaborating for the past 3 years, and today you're seeing some of the results of this effort. And also, if you want more information, you can, of course, visit our website. We will also be putting up very soon an educational program. You can also find all our deliverables, newsletter, the tool Insight that was mentioned, and so on. And of course, please feel free to get in contact either with myself or with the colleagues from Factor 4, or of course, any other in this ecosystem that could help promote or be inspired by this pay-for-performance approach. That's all from me, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philippos. I think that now it's Marianne's turn. She will illustrate some examples of the implementation of the P4P model in the residential sector in the United States. The floor is yours, Marianne.
Thank you. Well, my name is Marianne Santini. I work for the Regulatory Assistance Project. We are a global nonprofit and we work on policy innovations in the energy transition. So pay-for-performance programs are very interesting for us. I'm going to share a few slides with you on some examples of how pay-for-performance schemes have been or are implemented in the US, in the residential sectors and other sectors. So when the SENSEI project started, one of the first things that we have done is to look at the international experience in pay-for-performance schemes for energy efficiency. And we have used this knowledge to actually shape the other deliverables and our thinking around P4P in the EU. We selected a number of examples, and the way we distinguish between pay-for-performance schemes and traditional subsidy schemes is that we looked at examples where the savings would be established by comparing method energy consumption to a baseline and not deemed, as it is often the case with energy efficiency subsidy schemes. And we look at cases where payments were proportional to the energy saved instead of having a one-off payment. Usually this one-off payment takes place upon the installation of material, whereas with P4P schemes, the payments take place once the equipment has been running for some time. So that was our guiding principles for selecting the examples, and we could find 11 examples across the world. So that was already 2 years ago. So since then, there's been quite some evolution. But I think the findings of the report are still valid today. So we could only find one example in the EU, and that was in Germany, and that was a relatively a small pilot, but very interesting. There was actually only one example in the residential sector, and this was in California, and I will get back to this. But since the report was published, there was a similar example that was launched in the state of New York, which also targets residential buildings and looks quite similar to the Californian example. When we look across those examples, we could find several things. So first of all, in all these cases, the scheme was initiated by a public authority, a system operator, or a utility. And in cases where the system operator or the utility was the origin of the scheme, very often this was in the context of an energy efficiency obligation scheme, and you actually had some guidance from the public authority for the utilities to test pay for performance in order to increase the efficiency of the energy efficiency programs. So that was a very important finding for us, and this relates to what Filippo said, that you need a market facilitator, that the schemes do not emerge by themselves. In those examples we've seen, in most of the cases, the eligibility rules were very flexible. So the energy efficiency actions that could be deployed in the context of those programs were very different, and it was quite open about what you could do. And again, in most of the cases, the program was making use of smart meters to track energy consumption before and after the intervention. So that's how performance was established. We looked also at payment structures. And there, in some of the cases, the payments would go to the end beneficiary directly. And in other cases, it would go to an aggregator. When it comes to the residential sector, because end beneficiaries are households, and it's many of them, the payments were going to the aggregator, and the aggregator would actually have a choice on how they would want to reach out their households. So as Philippos was saying, it is possible to do that through ESCOs or directly, whatever works in the situation and whatever is allowed under the scheme. But I think what we can say is that if you're aiming for the residential sector or for small buildings in the services sector, then an aggregator is very much needed, because the public authority, system operator, or the utility will not be able to engage with so many actors. The payments would run for 1 to 5 years. So that's also where we could find some differences in the examples. 1 year is very short. So basically you would still check how the project is performing, but you don't go back to it after a couple of years. 5 years allows tracking performance over a longer amount of time. Very often this decision is also related to the business model of the P4P programs and how the different market actors would work under the payment structure. So this is a very important design decision. So as we mentioned, the payments were proportional to the energy saved. But actually, in many cases, there was also a grant, which was awarded to project participants to enter the scheme. And this is because of the cost of getting started with such a scheme. And this was a feature in many of the examples we have reviewed. The price was set in advance or was the result of the bids. I have to say also that sometimes the price was not available to the public. So it was a negotiation between the utility and the aggregator. So we could not always find what price was paid. And also sometimes there was a bonus for certain measures. So even though the P4P schemes were very flexible in terms of what measures were eligible, sometimes they would want to push certain measures and would award a bonus for these measures. Now looking at the residential sector, so the example we have is from California. It's a case study from PG&E, the utility there. It targets the residential sector. PG&E rolls out the P4P programs through aggregators. Those aggregators are rewarded based on the performance of portfolio of buildings. They're using the CalTrack method to track the energy savings in these buildings. The payments are 100% proportional to the energy saved, so there is no grant involved. The prices result from bids and they were not disclosed to the public. The payments are monthly payments, and we heard that this was established in order that the aggregator wouldn't have to wait for a whole year to receive some of the payments. The payments are spread over 2 years. And the prices are actually based on the expected lifetime of the measure. So even though there's some nice music playing, so even though the prices are only paid for 2 years, they are different according to the lifetime of the measure. So this was a way to promote long-term measures, even though the scheme would actually stop paying aggregators after 2 years. So what we can find out from reviewing these examples is that when designing a P4P scheme, it's really important to look at what kind of actions will be supported, how they will be measured. I think Filippo's already mentioned, but this is a very important part of setting up a P4P. The payment structure is also very important. In many examples that we have seen, it took quite some time for the scheme designers to come up with the payment structure which would work for market actors. So this is really an element where we should pay a lot of attention. And of course, the actors involved is very important. So what is the market like? What's the role of ESCOs? It's also interesting to note that in some of the examples we have reviewed, even though the push for establishing the P4P scheme came from the public authority and sometimes even the legislator, the market actually was instrumental in setting up the scheme. So the market was actually asking to test, to pilot these schemes. And I think it's a lesson we should keep in mind when looking at the EU context, because the market can basically make a demand on how they would want to organize it. So with that, I will close my presentation, and I'm looking forward to our debate.
Thank you very much, Marianne. In fact, it is time for a debate session, and I will leave the floor to Lieven, who will introduce briefly the topic of this debate. And since our group is not too big, we thought it would be better to just stay in this plenary session. Lieven, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Lieven van Stralen. I'm senior partner at Energy Invest, but I'm here today mainly as president of the Belgian ESCO Association, called Belesco. Maybe some of you know our activities. Just in a few words, basically we group the different stakeholders of the ESCO sector, energy services sector in Belgium, meaning, of course, most of the ESCOs, larger ones, also some smaller ones, also ESCO project facilitators and financiers, which are active in ESCO financing solutions. Our association, just in a few words, basically we do a number of activities like policy support, like organizing networking events and customer events. We also work on content level, for example, recently done quite a lot of work around off-balance financing in the public sector, in line with Eurostat rules, for those of you who are familiar with those topics. And then we also provide, for example, training. We were the organization that trained the first, via, of course, EVO, the first certified MNV professionals. And we also organized for several years now a postgraduate in energy efficiency services at the PXL University in Limburg, in the eastern part of Belgium. So enough said about Belesco. Let's dive into exactly our debate with a first question basically related to the role that ESCOs can play. As you've heard also previously, ESCOs are today already familiar with delivering energy services to large building owners and aggregate that type of demand across public or private building stocks. They manage long-term contracts. They deliver saving guarantees, which could basically make them key stakeholders for delivering such a pay-for-performance model successfully. So my question is, what role do you see for ESCOs in this model in Europe and in Belgium particularly? And I would like both ESCOs, if they're around here in the debate, but also other participants to reflect on that and to share some of their views on the roles that ESCOs could play or should play. And I think you can basically activate your mic and take the floor.
I just copied and pasted the question in the chat box so that you can read it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a short intervention here and say that, at least in the thinking we've had in the project, ESCOs seem to be absolutely essential. The pay-for-performance approach can be an add-on to existing energy performance contracting, making it a bit more fine-tuned. And really, it seems that they can be in various stages of the whole process. There is a differentiation between smaller and larger ESCOs, seeming that larger ESCOs could be functioning as aggregators as well. And then there's also a question, to what extent can smaller ESCOs scale up to this need in the market? Yeah, this will be a short add-on on my side.
Yes, I think it's an interesting point you made there about the aggregator role that you mentioned in your own presentation, and to what extent ESCOs can themselves become aggregators. Is that something that other people see happen, or do they rather see maybe a model in which aggregators play alongside ESCOs, and each with their own role and responsibilities and specialty? It's of course already quite an advanced question also in that sense. Maybe to come back a little bit to some of the basics, for example, in this sector. We've seen some examples from the residential side. On the other hand, today, some ESCOs are not active in the residential, but more in the commercial buildings or in the public buildings. Does anybody have a view on the role that ESCOs could play, but also in relation to the segment in which they are active or could be active with this new model? Is that something that people have thoughts about? I see a question, maybe while letting people basically reflect on some of the questions earlier, on what's the difference with an energy performance contract. I think that's a good question, because today ESCOs deliver energy performance contracts and they already provide a guarantee. Maybe that's a good question for Philippus or for Charles-Henri, somebody from the SENSEI project, explaining a little bit more in detail what is the difference with a classical EPC contract, or what's the layer on top of what is being delivered through energy performance contracts. I don't know who wants to tackle that question.
I can give some ideas about that from what I know and from what I learned about the pay for performance. Pay for performance is a program thing. So it deals with large numbers of projects. We speak hundreds of energy saving projects with some conditions on the type of projects, the type of buildings, type of customers, type of savings expected, type of performances, like impact on the network, etc. Whereas the energy performance contract is really an energy saving contract on the longer term for one building, a large building, or a pool of buildings. It doesn't have really that programmatic aspect, which is important, especially as I learned from speaking with financial institutions, especially for the financing part. If you can standardize a program and all its operational aspects for a large number of projects, and I speak hundreds of projects or even more, it makes it very attractive for financiers to step in, because they can actually spend a lot more euros or dollars with less administrative work around it, less due diligence. So that's one of the aspects. But basically, it is also a performance contract, only at an aggregated level. I don't know if that's at least a partial answer to that question.
Yes, I think it is, and I guess in that sense that an energy performance contract can be an underlying tool that is being used within such a larger program. Maybe not even the only one, but could be a key delivery mechanism, basically, of energy efficiency as part of a pay for performance model. Okay, there's another question from one of our financial people, I think, in the room. Yeah, the question is, so what if no performance is delivered due to external casualties? For example, the Corona crisis, where people were working from home for quite a long time 2 years ago, and that CapEx and OpEx costs are made, but there's nobody to pay. I can say maybe a few words about that myself, because as project facilitator, we encountered, of course, such projects and such issues. Often what is then being done is either let's say the bonuses and the penalty schemes are being temporarily suspended. Yeah? It doesn't mean that there is no performance anymore being delivered or even being measured. It's just that the consequence of potential non-achievement of the performance is not being paid in one way or the other, and that's a shared risk between the customer and the ESCO, basically. Alternative ways would be or have been also implemented is that you basically take into account such changes, whether it's difference in occupation or difference in for example, ventilation requirements as a non-routine adjustment factor. Basically meaning that you're correcting your baseline based on such an event as Corona or another unexpected event. But it doesn't mean fundamentally that energy isn't being saved. It doesn't fundamentally mean that maintenance isn't being performed and so on and so forth. It just means that the performance itself is adapted or even suspended based on such event. Now, how this would specifically work in a performance contract, I know. How it would specifically work in a pay for performance model, I'm less familiar with that. But I can imagine that provisions would be made in the program to deal with that in a similar way. Okay, I have a question maybe to those of you who feel that they can say something about that. Is like the particular situation in Belgium, as some of you know, we're a little bit complex country with a national or federal level, and then regions that have a lot of autonomy, and particularly in the areas of energy efficiency and subsidies, for example, which are regional schemes or regional political responsibilities, whereas let's say the ESCO market is somewhat more organized at a national level, and that's also because ESCOs don't necessarily, because they adapt to the local market, but they want to have as much as possible unified policies. So the question on the pay for performance model, for example, is that something that would have to be organized more on a regional level or more at a national level? I don't know if there's anybody who has any views on that.
Even my view on it would depend on the program. If pay for performance is used to improve an existing subsidy program, then they should be applied in the same vicinity expanse of national, regional. It's flexible. If, however, we're talking about the involvement of power system operators, a DSO in this case, then yeah, it should be in the area of the DSO. So in Belgium, Brussels, that would be only for Sebelga. Yeah, so I quite flexible, I would say, depending on the application.
Yeah, so it's more the let's say the market facilitator that has to determine where is the right appropriate implementation. Him or being himself active also rather at the national level or at the regional level, I guess.
Yes, yeah, in Belgium it would, I think, very practically and thinking now already about pilots, maybe pay for performance pilots in the coming years. We would definitely pursue that on a regional level, because I mean everything around energy efficiency is structured and organized and legally organized by region. So it's probably the best. Would be the best way. Even also the system operators are different for the regions. So and they are really important, very important partners in setting up these pay for performance, especially in the first years pilots. So I think it would be regional.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to look a little bit at the timing. I don't know how much time, if any, we have left for finishing this first part of the debate, because there will be a second part a little bit later on yeah, who specifically should be such a market facilitator and will be driving the rollout. But I think for this first exchange, I guess we are more or less through our time, correctly?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay, yeah. Good. Then let's continue with the other presentations, and we'll get back to the next small debate in a little bit of time.
Yes, thank you very much. Now it's Charles' turn with the two different interventions. So please, Charles, the floor is yours. So we are on time, so
okay,
be comfortable.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay. Will be okay like this. Okay. So in my first intervention now, I will try to look at pay for performance from the perspective: is this an interesting mechanism, a market mechanism, boost financing of energy renovation? In fact, more financing toward and investments towards. I like always to start this question, this topic, with this very speaking slide. It's a slide from the US from a few years ago, but it compares actually energy efficiency investments in terms of annual return and risk index, so the volatility of the risk linked to the investment. And you see that energy efficiency is a very low risk, very high return investment. But nevertheless, we still do not attract the mass of investment that is needed for the big energy transition that is now ahead of us. And so the question is why. We have a very interesting investment opportunity, but money is still not flowing in large amounts towards this investment. And from the energy efficiency point of view, and from the energy efficiency world, a lot of initiatives have been taken already to make it more attractive for investors, to increase the confidence of investors, and protocols, development of standards for energy audits, development of professional tools for audit and pre-engineering to make sure that the predicted savings are really achieved. Mechanisms like energy performance contracting, etc., the investment confidence platform, de-risking energy efficiency financing group, dialogue platforms between the financial sectors and the energy efficiency sectors, different securitization mechanisms, mainly in the US, then, etc., etc. So, and still, I think there's not bringing the amounts of investment that we would like. And the question is, could pay for performance bring the needed additional boost, the turbo boost to energy investments towards energy. Another interesting thing that has been studied in recent years is actually that energy efficiency doesn't bring only the energy cost savings benefits as a financial benefit. It brings a lot of other benefits that can be quantified financially. When you increase the energy efficiency of a building, it appears that work productivity increases due to comfort increases, rental income can increase, building sales price increases, etc., etc. CO2 savings can be quantified, maintenance costs go down, etc. And so studies have been made about this. This is one quantified example. Maybe some of you know this RAP publication, the regulatory assistance, about the cake of benefits, the multiple layer, multiple benefits linked to energy efficiency, where the benefits are grouped in three categories: the utility system benefits, so for the distribution networks, the participant, of course, the end user will see the cost go down, and societal benefits that have been quantified both in the EU and the US. Air quality, energy security, economic developments, even public health impacts have been quantified actually per saved kilowatt hour. So how can we include this element in a model to attract financing? Quick one is a look at a very high level view on how the financial flows go into pay for performance. Actually, we have a financial flow before energy retrofit, where we have a customer paying for energy consumed to the energy provider. After an energy retrofit, inside the framework of a pay for performance program, of course, the consumer pays less because he consumes less to the energy provider, and the energy savings are used to pay back investors that finance the retrofit, but also, and that is the difference. One of those multiple benefits, which is a grid benefit, is also a revenue stream that can be paid by the energy provider, by the distribution operator, the transmission operator to the investor. So we have an additional, a new revenue stream, one of the many that can be captured in a program. So those ideas and what you saw before in the presentation of Philippos and Marion, we presented actually to a group of financial stakeholders. We did stakeholder consultations. And we did structured interviews with risk capital providers, banks, insurance companies, and pension funds to ask them, is the concept of pay for performance something, is it known first? Do you understand it? Then what is your opinion on the effectiveness of pay for performance for bringing more financing, attracting more financing to energy efficiency? And what do you think is there potential for rollout in your field of operation? And I'll go to the results of that quickly, and then of course I'll give the reference of where it is documented in detail, where all these feedback from the financial institutions is. But the key things is, of course, there is interest in capturing additional revenue streams, where they might come from. I'll go into some more detail in my second intervention. There is certainly interest in financing standardized portfolios of projects. So if we look at a pay-for-performance program, few hundreds of projects, you're not speaking about a few million euros investment where you have to do all the due diligence, but a few hundred of millions investments of euros. So with the same due diligence, if you want. So it's actually a lot less work per invested euro, to put it simply. The role of aggregator is seen as something crucial, but there is a lot of expectation on it. So it's kind of partner for the investors to structure the funding of the program. So financial institutions want to work together with a more technical, energy efficiency technical partner, which is the aggregator, to set up funds that are structured, standardized, streamlined, so that everything goes, the eligibility of projects, etc., are standardized and take less work. But of course, that goes with some responsibilities for the aggregators to function according to all financial rules, financial legislation that is existing, to be compliant with that, to give full transparency about financial transactions, etc., and should be familiar with financial risk and cost management, of course. Financial institutions would prefer to see public-private combinations of financing and or guarantee mechanisms, so covering by state guarantee, especially in the first years of introducing pay-for-performance, because they see it as a new type of investment project. They would expect, of course, professional, transparent measurement and verification, and they call it, you add a V, a third letter, a second V, which is valuation. It's very important to forecast the financial revenue streams that will be generated. They see it as a very positive element that a system operator or governmental climate agencies are included in the program. And most interviewed organizations are eager to participate in a pay-for-performance pilot, especially given the raised attention for ESG goals in the financial sector. There are some howevers, of course. Banks have not waited for pay-for-performance to start aggregating projects. So there are a lot of aggregation initiatives, maybe not specifically as pay-for-performance, so not maybe linked to specifically to the metered savings generated by projects and programs, more organized around big renovation funds, in which not only energy is counting, but just renovation of the building stock. And that's my second point. Energy renovation is usually only a part, in their view, of building renovation investments. The program scopes of the programs set up by financial institutions are much broader. There is a doubt about how to set up a clear contractual distribution of risks and benefits. It's the same problem as EPC, but even more complex here. So how do we distribute risks and revenues, the benefits, among building owners, ESCOs, aggregators, DSO, financial institutions, maybe public agencies, etc. Then if we look at the duration, I will come back to that in a few minutes, of pay-for-performance programs in the US, as we have seen them. We speak about 3 to 5 years, which is rather a short time horizon compared to what we are used to in terms of energy efficiency contractual projects. And also, and I'll come back to that also, the EU financial market context, the culture of financing in Europe is quite different actually from the one that is used in the US actually. Okay, so that was in a few words the feedback we got from financial institutions. Of course, there are a lot more details on that, and we also use that feedback to recommend guidelines on how to design pay for performance schemes in Europe, so as to engage, to be sure that they engage and that they attract financial institutions and third-party investors towards energy efficiency. And all that is documented in our deliverable 6.3, which is publicly available, and in which you will probably find it on the website. I'm not sure of that. We will have to see that with Philippos at the end of the session. Okay, so that concludes my first intervention. In my second part, I would like to. We've looked at attracting financing. I would rather look now, or maybe look at it from the ESCO point of view, which is of course important because ESCOs are important, have an important role to play in deploying this market mechanism, of course. And I would like to do that by looking at some operational details, some specific details in or practical elements in real tenders for pay for performance programs as they are existing in the US. I will not go in too much detail. Maybe Matt Golden, who is present here today, can also add some elements at the end of the session to that. When we look at program tendering details, well, when we look at the tenders that are existing on the US market today, we see that they detail elements that are very important actually for ESCOs to look at, and that ESCOs would have to take into account to function within a pay for performance program, because that is what it is. Actually, a pay for performance is a context in which energy efficiency projects will be executed. Important things are who is the tendering party and what is the expectation. So we speak about pay for performance, but of course that performance is something that is expected by the tenderer, and it could be a grid operator, a system operator, and then the expectations would be grid benefits like a load reduction in time, etc. It could also be a public authority, an agency, a climate agency, in the framework of an energy efficiency obligation scheme, or in a subsidy scheme like Marion showed before, and that they want to link the subsidies to metered savings. Another element is of course, the type of buildings that can participate in the program, the implementation and performance period of the program. As I spoke about 3 to 5 years, I will show one example of that. Of course, the dispatch and schedule of the financial incentives. When do we pay for the performance? To whom? Very important details. And that can be modulated or different from program to program. Then the type of energy efficiency measures that are allowed or prohibited. Prohibited is less likely to happen, but I would say the type of EE measures, a program can define some type of measures that will be paid for, and some other that can be executed, but that will not be taken into account in the performance that is realized. That could be, of course, roles and responsibilities of the ESCO, of the building owner, of the aggregator, there's all the stakeholders that are involved, specifications for measurement and verification, which data that need to be made available. And what can also be defined is the depth, the expected depth of energy savings, or statistical distribution of savings that are achieved per type of project. Just to illustrate, I will not, of course, not go to all the details because they are detailed in the training module, for which I will give the reference at the end of the presentation. Take really time to look at them in much more detail. For instance, here we have a program, which is a program from the New York Sustainable Energy Research and Development Agency, I think, with Con Edison as a system operator, running from 2020 to 2024. It's called the Business Energy Program, and they have selected some types of buildings: small offices, warehouse, small retail, multifamily, etc., with a typical consumption pattern for electricity and for gas in those type of buildings, and the number of buildings in thousands that are eligible to participate in the program. Implementation and performance period for this same program. So you see, you have a timeline, 2020, 2024. You have an implementation period of 2 years for energy efficiency measures, which is quite short, I would say, compared to energy performance contracts, in which ESCOs are more used to operate. And then you see, okay, we have a first project implemented in January 2021, and then a performance period of 3 years, in which the performance of the project will be measured and retributed, paid for. The depth of energy savings, also here an example of how it can be specified in a tender. So you have the percentage of saving, and then the minimum number of electric projects and natural gas projects, which is projects with impact on the consumption of natural gas, projects with the impact of on the electric consumption, the numbers for a given percentage of savings. So it's a kind of statistical representation of the expected depths of savings that need to be realized. And in this program, tariff has been set to $12 per 300 kilowatt hours saved. So that gives you an idea on the tariff, kind of tariff of energy efficiency that is performed, that is realized. Okay, I have 3 slides with a lot of text, but I think it's quite interesting for an ESCO to have a look at, in terms of financial and revenue implications, in terms of operational implications, and in terms of commercial implications. What does it mean for me as an ESCO to participate in a pay-for-performance program? This is also something that we set up, that we came to these conclusions together with ESCOs by interviews with ESCOs. So we explained them, this is pay-for-performance. What do you think are the pluses and the minuses of participating? And so we did that for the financial, for the commercial, and for the operational aspects of their business. Quickly, again, this is also detailed in the training module, so I'll go through some of them. But from a financial point of view, of course, you can get on or capture an additional income flow through the pay-for-performance program, coming from quantified benefits, including other benefits than just the energy cost savings. I think this is a really important one. Since it's a lot of projects, you could also count probably on equipment sourcing cost advantage because of economies of scale. And then certainly also easier access to financing. That's certainly a point because of the larger programs that can be financed through a structured fund, a fund that is structured by the aggregator and a financial institution, one or more. That will probably mean less work, less difficulty in gaining access to financing. Of course, there are certainly challenges from a revenues point of view. What we think, but this is not sure, and this will probably depend on the type of program, but there could be, maybe that's interesting for a debate also, there could be a conflict maybe between energy cost saving benefits and grid benefits. So an ESCO doing effort to gaining grid benefits might maybe endanger incomes or revenues from energy saving benefits, or the opposite. Maybe not. Maybe they will add to each other, but it will depend, I think, with the type of buildings, the type of project and program. What might be a problem also is an unclear or a very complex benefit allocation between all the stakeholders. So making sure that all the revenue streams goes in an efficient way to the different stakeholders that get it. One negative point of the economies of scale is, of course, that the ESCOs might need to lower or might be expected to lower their tariffs to the other stakeholders in the Pay for Performance program because of economies of scale. In terms of operational implications, of course, the evaluating projects to join or not will be standardized. So that should be simplified work for the ESCO. Part of the work will be done by the aggregator, so there will be some unburdening, especially for management of financial aspects. And MMV procedure will be defined for the whole program, so that makes it also probably less work for the ESCO. In terms of challenges, you can already imagine that working inside the framework of a Pay for Performance program might reduce autonomy and flexibility, which is often needed with specific customers. The program will also come with, and that was the question, what is the difference between EPC and Pay for Performance? There will be performance, a performance contractual model and constraints at the program level, which will add complexity to the operating of the ESCO. And MMV rules, of course, might differ on the type of benefits that has to be measured. So that might make it a bit more difficult to making the business case. And then finally, the commercial implications. Of course, an increase in business volume would be expected by participating in programs of large numbers of projects. Additional customer acquisition by the aggregator, so that's certainly a positive fact. Everybody who has worked as an ESCO in an EPC selling trajectory knows that it is difficult to convince people to explain everything. So if a part of that work is taken over by the program aggregator, it makes it easier for the ESCO. General market facilitation of important concepts like EPC will be done by aggregators, by climate agencies, which will help promote these in the market. And then on the side of the challenges, who knows that the aggregator will actually be expecting an unreasonably high customer acquisition fee or reduction of the costs and the tariffs of the ESCO. And yes, depending on the type of program, the aggregator might take over the ESCO business model and leave only the very standardized tasks to the ESCOs, limiting commercial flexibility for the ESCO and optimization of costs versus revenue, etc. So that might be a challenge. I think I will leave this one out. We are at 15:25. Or maybe just have a quick look at it. Of course, we are looking at a US program, a US concept, or a concept that has been rolled out and deployed in the US market conditions for energy efficiency financing, etc., which is still very different from the European one. First of the points is that I think the issue of network congestion is higher on the agenda in the US than in Belgium, than in Europe, although that will change. The main driving actor, must be said, in energy efficiency markets in Europe is still rather from a governmental and public side, rather than from private companies as is in the US. And then the non-recourse financing approach. With non-recourse financing, we mean like project financing of performance. So financing not linked to an infrastructure, but linked to the expected performance and the expected revenue of a project, is, I think, something that is more common and more easy in the US than in Europe. In Europe, it's cautious project by project. Everything is being looked at, and often I think European financial institutions will look at underlying infrastructure and try to have some guarantee from that, or include the energy saving project in a broader building renovation project, in which you can actually fix a guarantee for repayment to the underlying infrastructure. Whereas in the US, that is less the case, from what we heard and from what we learned. And yeah, also the way of attracting financing through packaging financial projects and securitization is much more common and easily done in the US, whereas in the EU, since the financial crisis, it's almost complete taboo. So this is a little bit the scheme that Philippos showed at the beginning, but in a little bit other format. But you see on the top, you have the system operator and the public authority that finance, and the blue full arrow that finance resulting benefits and the resulting performance of the program. We think in first, we probably have to count in the European context on public authority for funding based on achievement of CO2 reduction, energy savings, or just these type of goals that are important for a public authority, rather than the grid benefits when we start first pilots. Okay, so this was it for me. I went very quickly through all those details. Of course, most of them are coming from the part of the ESCOs in the e-learning tool. So overview of what pay for performance means on the different aspects for ESCOs. You have the link here. And the platform also works, I think, for system operators, building owners, and aggregators, I think. So that was it for me.
Hemos encontrado, y además de buena calidad, viseras de Sanyo.
Viseras. Ja. Ah, ja.
¿Quieres verlas?
Que son colores rojos.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. I put the link to the knowledge platform in the chat, and I also take the opportunity to say that all the information that are shared today, so presentations, the link that I put in the chat, the recording of the video, etc., will be sent afterwards. So if not today, surely by the end of this week, they will be sent to all participants. And now it's time for another debate. So, Liven, I think that it is your turn again. And this time we will talk about who will drive the rollout of a possible P4P model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I think that we learned from the previous presentations that the ecosystem basically to deliver the pay-for-performance model successfully is quite diverse. And there are several stakeholders that all may have their reasons to support it or even to push for its emergence in specific markets. So the question that I wanted to address with you in this next small debate is, who do you see being parties that could or should drive a possible rollout? And there are, of course, the ESCOs. Can they do that at individual level, or can, for example, an ESCO association like ourselves play a role, even though we don't necessarily have commercial activities? What about project facilitators? Do they have a role in rolling it out? I think an obvious one that was also suggested and presented are public authorities, national or regional governments or governmental agencies that can act as a P4P program authority. And then, of course, in that area, as public actors, already today we know in the market, certainly in Europe, that there are so-called public aggregators of projects, or sometimes also called one-stop shops, that are often being set up at the public level to realize energy renovation, energy efficiency projects within public buildings. And they're acting a bit like a facilitator, but at the same time as an aggregator. So there are a number of candidates, and I would be happy to hear from you. I think everybody who has some thoughts on who should basically drive that rollout and also play that role as market aggregator.
Ja, Lieven, Gert van Luminus. I think it's less important who does it, but how they do it. That is for me, the big thing. I think everything that is said until now is very interesting. The only thing I will remark is that I never saw a contract P4P. Which risks do they put all in? It's not only the, if you see to EPC now, it's not only the energy risk that an ESCO has to take, but there's all the risks, all the unknowns that they put with us. Is there asbestos? It's on your account. Is there other things? It's on your account. Didn't you see that installation? It's on your account. And I think that is more important, that how the contract will be made, than who will facilitate that contract. That's my opinion about that.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Gert, he's working at Luminus, one of our members, by the way, one of the ESCOs on the Belgian market, and making really the point on risks and how are they shared. I don't know if somebody who's more familiar with already existing P4P implementations or people from the SENSEI project can comment on that. Have they seen examples of P4P tenders or contracts that address or that provide a better balance, let's say, in within risks than ESCOs may sometimes encounter.
Yes, I've seen them, and I think it's a really interesting question. And the point you raise about the responsibilities of the ESCO is also really true and really important. Although actually the risks, technical risks, financial risks, and performance risks should be attributed or allocated to different stakeholders. It usually ends up with the ESCO. The tenders that I saw very simply put the responsibility for the performance of the program in the hands of the aggregator, and of course from there the aggregator will have to include ESCOs or other stakeholders that will execute the projects, and from there also risks will have to be contractually attributed. But if you look at the tenders coming from the network operators in the US, they will put mainly the performance issue with the aggregator, which doesn't mean we would need to do it like that if we design P4P programs in Europe, of course.
But it means probably that the customer himself also has to be involved somehow in this program. The way it may look now is that it's mainly between financiers, ESCOs, aggregators. But the fact that today quite a lot of risk is shifted towards the ESCOs is because that's what the customer is asking for, I guess.
Yeah, or what the facilitator is selling to the customer.
Yeah. Well, he's also an important stakeholder in the whole discussion, of course. Yes, I think Matt wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just saying that the risk alignment, just something to consider is the as like the public sector takes on performance risk, the challenge there that just to consider is that's where all the regulation comes from. So that's the trade, right? The alignment of incentives when the aggregator and the customer are taking the performance risk on their projects is one of the things that allows us to streamline implementation and kind of reduce the level of transaction costs on these projects. So that's the balance. If you can manage that risk privately, there's a really good argument to make that these pay for performance markets can be kept really simple. As soon as you start transmitting that performance risk to the public sector, then folks start asking hard questions about the misalignment of incentives and all of the regulation and rules that have to be put in place to make sure that that risk is actually being managed properly publicly. So that's just the trade to consider: is what is the least transaction cost, lowest cost? Is it easier to manage that risk privately, or if again share it publicly and accept all the regulations that come with it?
Yeah, I think often those risks are really at the technical project level, where the customer or the facilitator is shifting them towards the ESCO, and if the facilitator himself is public, he may have tendency to shift more risks to the private sector.
Indeed.
But the ESCO, if the facilitator is himself a private facilitator, he may be more sensitive to the risks of private ESCOs and maybe try to find a better balance there.
That's a big difference. That's the big difference, yes.
Okay, but that hasn't necessarily, okay, but that certainly gave an interesting view on not so much or not only who should be driving the development of such a scheme, but certainly how, and so I think attention for risk is therefore important. But to come back to the key question of who should be doing it, are you then saying, for example, Gert, that the public facilitators, aggregators / one-stop shops are not necessarily the best party to do so?
But if they, for the moment in Belgium, I don't think so. But if they, the benefit is that uniformize the tendering. So if you have 4 different projects, the 4 different projects are the same. That's an advantage, I think. But my question is more like, are they really capable of understanding what we do? I have the feeling at the moment that the private sector better understands what is at stake, what has to be done, which info is needed, which are the risks of an ESCO, which are the risks of the client, of course, which are the wishes of the client, because and I think if like I said, if everything is public, it's very difficult to have a partner on the other side who understands, who we can discuss, who we can negotiate with.
Maybe it's good to highlight that the aggregators I know of and I learned of, and Matt can maybe comment on that, but that are private actors, private companies. From what I saw, for instance, Franklin Energy that acts as an aggregator, and has like 50% of energy efficiency expertise people in their staff, and 50% more communication campaigns, awareness campaigns people. So really the 2 aspects of energy efficiency programs, energy efficiency campaigns. So they would be the partners speaking with the ESCOs. Of course, I don't know the whole market in the US. This is only one example.
No.
Yeah, actually, some of how to think about managing this risk and flowing through the aggregators, something that we talk about quite a bit is, as your portfolios grow and you get increasingly better data on performance, it becomes much easier to manage the performance risk of projects. We find that energy efficiency in general, over a large enough projects is actually very stable. You have winners and losers, but it's highly predictable at a portfolio level. But you do have a cold start problem, which is how do you get off the ground when there's not a lot of data on performance fundamentally? So one thing that we consider is that when the aggregator is getting paid, their customers buying a project, and this is, I think, an important facet, the customer is paying for their benefits, might be an ESCO contract, could be cash, could be credit. And then there's a secondary cash flow that is representative of the benefits to the grid for that aggregated portfolio, that virtual power plant. And that, so as an ESCO, you have now 2 cash flows. You're getting paid by your customer for the performance of their project and their comfort and their bill savings, and you're also getting paid by grid operators for reductions in T&D costs and capacity and energy and GHGs. And that secondary cash flow, can be highly discounted, and that's one of the things we like to focus on initially, which is you may forecast a certain amount of savings and value from that cash flow, but there's nothing that says you have to take that future cash flow and give it all to your customer. And so from an onboarding path, looking at when you're an ESCO and you're retrofitting a lot of buildings, you're creating these grid benefits. Right now, you're not getting paid for them. In the future, through flexibility markets and pay for performance, you can get paid for that value. But you're out of the gate, it's not a requirement that you take that money and deploy it, right? You can be very conservative with that until you get higher degrees of confidence in the performance of your projects. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg, but the key thing is you're not required to lay the egg out the gate. But ultimately, you want, as a business, I think you want to capture all the cash flows and benefits that your projects are accruing. And if you do that, you'll make more money and your customers can get a better deal over time.
Yeah, that type of model has also been explored or let's say designed in another European project called Ambience, which is a bit of a sister project of SENSEI through what was called an AEPC, an active building energy performance contract. So basically doing what you said, Matt, is activating flexibility, demand response in buildings, and then aggregating that towards potentially the network distribution company or the DSO. So there are some synergies, I guess, between those type of models and what we're trying to look at here. What about those DSOs? Because that's then also the question. Can they be drivers? I understood from the previous presentations that in the US, some of those tenders or programs are being rolled out by DSOs. Are they potential actors to do so in Europe and in Belgium? Does anybody have a view on that? Or are there reasons why DSOs would not be such a good choice of party to drive rollout, unlike the case in the US, where, for example, you mentioned congestion, Charles. Congestion is maybe a bigger driver there. Is that one of the reasons why DSOs are driving that development in the US?
Yes, I think so. If you look at, for example, the tenders that we saw, but certainly not only that. Actually, we looked at some information. If you work on net congestion at the moment, that it's more important. You actually also work on CO2, on greenhouse gas content of the produced electricity very much. So we see that the two are quite linked. So we have the two advantages actually linked. For Belgium, I don't know. We're certainly going to start discussions with DSOs. I expect maybe not a very big enthusiasm to start with that. But one of the paths to start slowly, step by step, to introducing concept of pay for performance and try a pilot is looking at existing energy efficiency obligation schemes and do the exercise together with the system operator of why don't we try to change that to a performance based, to a metered savings program based on a pay for performance approach, grouping, aggregating projects. And I think that would be a good way, because they have to do energy efficiency obligation subsidies, and so we could start by linking them to and then maybe measuring the benefits, etc., and seeing if it's worth or what it's worth for them. So that would be a
yes. Well, within Belesco, we've been thinking quite. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was saying that within Belesco, we've been thinking, because of, I guess for obvious reasons, quite some time about subsidy schemes that are more focused on subsidizing the performance rather than the technology. So that could be, let's say, an underlying driver to get authorities involved from that point of view, particularly as public money is becoming scarce. Okay, I think we're reaching the end of this part of the debate. Thanks a lot to everybody for your contributions, and I'm sure that if there are additional questions or views to share, you can certainly get in touch with the organizers of the webinar and the people from SENSEI. Thank you very much, and I'll give you the floor back.
Thank you very much, Lieven. And we are reaching almost the end of our workshop, and now we have our special guest from the US, Matt Golden. The floor is yours, and also thank you very much for joining in a bit last minute, but it's great to have you here.
Yeah, no problem. The early guest, I have gotten I think a liter of coffee in me throughout this presentation. I'm on the west coast of the US, so I got an early start of things today. Well, I'll go ahead and share a little bit of a screen. I'm going to go through this really quickly, actually, but just to make the presentation a little less boring. So I'm with Recurve. We've been developing pay for performance, what we really think of as a platform for virtual power plants. That's really a synonym. Pay for performance is the mechanism. We pay for actually what you deliver, which is something, it's very similar from an ESCO standpoint. Within energy efficiency, obviously, energy service companies are financing and ensuring savings to the customer. We think that's great, but there's another set of values that are often being left on the table. Your customer might be getting a better building and saving energy, but there are a whole bunch of other actors like DSOs and various retailers and others who are receiving benefit from the results of your projects. And we think if you can't capture that benefit, we're leaving a lot of important value streams on the table. So, a couple quick things. We've been implementing these programs, around the U.S., learning a lot of painful lessons in the process, but also, seeing things starting to really advance. So we've talked about this. This is our kind of very simplified version of kind of the flow of capital, but the main kind of ideas around our approach to what we talk about as flex market, where we're integrating both energy efficiency, long-term load shaping, replacing HVAC, insulating attics, as well as dispatchable event-driven demand response into a price signal. And that price signal is sent to, as we've been talking about, aggregators. And definitely ESCOs look a lot like aggregators to us. They, you know how to manage performance risk, you know how to acquire customers, you know how to complete projects. But also, frankly, smart thermostat companies, storage vendors, there's, commercial, residential, anybody that can capture customers and deliver projects that have benefits to the grid, we consider an aggregator. And so the focus is enabling those aggregators, folks like yourselves, to develop business models for customers and really staying out of that relationship between the customer and letting the market innovate on what technologies and, is it a ESCO financing to the customer? Are they using cash? Are they using credit? What are they, what are they actually buying and how are you delivering services is really a function of your business model. But looking at those customers and using open source measurement to quantify how is load affected by these projects, and what were these projects worked to a different set of counterparties that aren't often at the table, which are, actually I'm going to reference a lot. It starts with, our version of efficiency schemes, but we think that energy efficiency program dollars in the US as well are getting smaller, not bigger, and come with a lot of strings. And if you want to be in the real game as we decarbonize the grid, your counterparty are the DSOs and the DTOs and the retailers. And there's a whole, in every market, we might have different names for it, but there's somebody managing the grid, right? There's somebody buying capacity and energy. There's a GHG value somewhere. And, again, if you're out retrofitting a whole bunch of buildings that are reducing GHGs and supporting the grid, it doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion, that the customer's paying full freight for that and we're giving those benefits to the other counterparties for free. We think that virtual power plants should be paid exactly like actual power plants when we're delivering real benefits that can be quantified. So, once that's quantified, the utility is paying the aggregator for the value of their customer base, their portfolio. And it's up to that aggregator to determine how that gets transmitted to the customer. Do you discount upfront cost? Do you discount financing? Do you provide some free equipment? Do you do better marketing? And again, as we've talked about from a risk management standpoint, some of that is that you don't have to stick your neck out too far at the beginning until you get good data on what your projects are worth. But we think ultimately, there's two major cash flows in every project you want to capture: customer benefits and societal grid benefits. If you put those two things together, energy efficiency gets a lot more competitive. I'm going to go really quickly through this, but we think the very baseline, you can't have a market without a product. So we've been working for over a decade to standardize M&V into open source tools. This is really important. You can't, having every engineer produce a different result for the same set of projects by using different methods. Really important to have those standard weights and measures at the bottom. We call these revenue grade because you can put them in a contract. They're not, they're standard across all parties. This is just an example of what that looks like. This is actually a demand response event. We use the same exact methods for DR and energy efficiency, just with different baseline periods. But you can see, the baseline generated by some of the open source tools we call this Flex Meter, which is, again, we're both working with utilities and also with market operators like the CAISO for demand response. And this is actually during the 2020 heat wave. We have blackouts, and you can see the demand response, very specifically responding to this event and being able to quantify the impact. And I won't get into detail here, but there's some talk about, we do handle non-routine events in small portfolios. We may make adjustments to manage risk, but the real way that we're doing this at scale is by measuring baselines for each customer and then generating non-participant comparison groups. And we found that to be very effective even through the COVID period to normalize out the effects on the population of things like extreme weather or COVID, for example. And so it's much at a portfolio level, it's a much more data-driven approach, but it's very effective. not necessarily in individual customers, but on portfolios of assets to deal with things like extreme events like COVID, for example. So in this market, we're out actually working with aggregators. This is just some of the examples. The demand flex market down here. You can go to that website, demandflexmarket.com, get a sense of who some of the active aggregators are. Definitely ESCOs are in that mix, but it's much broader than that. Anybody that can get a customer and get them to do stuff that affects demand in a valuable way, you can be an aggregator. And we've been applying that again through like some of the the schemes that have been talked about with utilities as counterparties primarily. But we really think that energy efficiency and demand response, we think all those things are actually different facets of flexibility. They're not silos, they have to work together. But at the end of the day, we really do think the future of this market is that we're not just saving customers on their bills, but we're building virtual power plants that can help decarbonize the grid, and that value needs to be captured. And that's really urgent in the US. We're like 3 weeks out now, or 2.5 weeks out from a big heat event in California that we were part of. The governor last summer in California put out we're at a 3.5 to 4.4 gigawatt hour shortfall that we're overcoming. A lot of that is happening on the demand side. That's like a couple nuclear power plants worth of missing supply during peaks in California. And one of the ways that we're responding to this, called by the governor is a program called Market Access that is based on the pay for performance models that we've been deploying, which is up to $150 million to start with statewide. And again, rather than kind of deploying an energy efficiency scheme or whatnot, we're working with aggregators to address summer peak and basically allowing companies like all of yours to enroll customers and get paid for reducing demand in the hours that are really valuable. So in California right now, that's 4 to 9 p.m. in the summer, and really 7 and 8, those 2 hours are the really bad ones for the state. So it's worth a lot to either reduce in those periods or to shift out of them. And so we set a price signal. This is the hourly signal, and this is US dollars. During the summer peak, it's 33 cents, in the hours of 4, 5, and 6, and 54 cents in the hours of 7 and 8 for reducing in that period. And again, you can do that through insulating attics and reducing, or you could do that through controls and shifting, where you get the arbitrage between the lower, the cheaper other hours and the peaks that we care about. And this gets highly lucrative for energy efficiency. If you have, for example, a commercial HVAC retrofit, in California, we deem that a 15-year value. So if you achieve these savings through something that is equipment-based, this is an example of what it's worth, savings in the first year that are paid based on the value of a 15-year useful life. So we're actually paying almost $3 a kilowatt for HVAC reductions in the summer peak. And when I say we, it's really a pass-through from recurve. It's the system benefit that's being generated. It's what we call total systems benefit in California is what we're actually paying out. So that's basically, again, the our kind of thinking here is efficiency schemes have really not scaled in the US, and I don't think they've scaled very well in Europe either that we've been looking at, and often produce somewhat dismal results when measured. So our goal is kind of take the middleman out and say, if we know who the counterparties are, I think like maybe you start with energy efficiency obligations, but I don't think it's one counterparty. But if you look around in any country in the in any part of the EU or the US, there is somebody managing T&D, there's somebody buying energy and signing long-term capacity contracts, and there's a GHG price that arrives someplace in that mix. And again, if you're retrofitting buildings and your customers are paying for shifting demand, we also want to respond to this grid signal, and we don't think that individual customers should be using their credit to build virtual power plants that are benefiting the broader grid, that we should be paying for those virtual power plants properly. And again, as an ESCO, you can initially treat this largely as gravy until you get more confident, but you should want to capture all the value streams as well, because you're going to be able to offer a better product to your customer at a lower cost and make more money on it if you can capture these benefits. And again, not expect your customer to go out of pocket to help the local DSO manage a part of their grid that has a peak problem, for example. So that I know we're at the very top. I'm happy to hang out a little bit. Very early for me. I think it's kind of late for you guys, but that's some of the thinking in the US. It feels, I think, a little farther out, but I think that like the tools and the mechanisms to do this are built. And I would highly encourage folks to look at some of these tools. Many of them, soon all of them, are actually in the Linux Foundation. So we've developed a lot of these systems, but they're wide open. And I think there's great utility in standardizing on what is a in our case, what is a megawatt, but how one measures and quantifies the impact of energy efficiency is something that we really should have consistent, and ideally it would be consistent across the US and the EU, as opposed to developing different mathematics. But happy to take some questions. I know we're right at the end.
Yes, Matt, actually there is a question from Leven in the chat. I think that you can see it. It's quite long, so maybe it would be nice if you could answer, because it can be of some interest also to other participants.
Yeah, no problem. I just figured out how to pull the chat up while sharing a screen.
Otherwise, if you want, I can read it aloud.
Yeah, no, I'm looking. So it kind of remains to be seen. We're just breaking out of the silos right now. So one of the big deficits is that energy efficiency as a standalone value and demand response as a standalone value, neither of them are all that compelling. And most of the things that you do in a building, many of the things, can be both long-term predictable load shaping and also dispatched during events. And so where we're being most successful, we're seeing those things starting to merge, right? Whether it's a HVAC system with controls, or frankly, storage behind the meter batteries looks more like energy efficiency and how it operates under the right conditions than demand response. And so to date, most of the stuff we've been doing is long-term predictable load shaping. And that's really what we think of as energy efficiency. It's not necessarily even reducing demand. You can shift out a peak and produce value. We're not actually trying to reduce kilowatt hours anymore. We're actually building new load. We're trying to flatten the shape. And so we want and actually the term of art these days is used and useful virtual power plants, which means we want folks doing everything they can to load shape to reduce peaks every day, and then incrementally doing more during peak event periods. So being able to measure those two values properly so you can pay for them is really critical. But we don't want one or the other. We really want both things to be happening, right? And that's good for the economics. What we find is that demand response is a little bit there's not enough events to really make it super valuable. And then conversely, energy efficiency, there's a lot of it, but it's much less valuable because it's happening every day. And again, what we really want to see is projects that do both long-term shaping and are responsive to whatever degree is possible.
Thank you. Are there other questions? No, I see that everyone is silent. Okay, again, if there are more questions, you may obviously think about and then write them to me as an answer to the email, to the follow-up email that I will send you. And I will forward the questions to the speakers. So we can also exchange a little bit in this way. Now, just a little conclusion. Charles, I don't know if you want to end this part.
Yes, very.
Charles or Philippos, I can't remember.
It's the same for me, but very briefly, I want to thank you, of course, all. I hope the concept of pay for performance and its basic constituents have been clear to most of you. Of course, if there are questions, come back to us by mail to Victoria. What I would like you to tell you also is that we are certainly trying, based on the learnings we have from this project, to set up pilots. And now I'm speaking from Factor 4. We will try to do that in Belgium, but I think in other member states, we would like to do that also, because we have learned a lot based on feedback from the sector, based on what happened in the US, but you only really learn it, what it's worth in the market conditions of the EU if we try pilots, if we try to implement it. So that's the first thing. A lot of interesting information is captured in the deliverables. So certainly, if you're interested, take a look at that. And in the learning platform, to which the link has been shared by Victoria. So that's it for me. Thank you for being present. Philippos, I don't know if you want to add something.
But really, I want to thank from my side as well, and I hope that the information provided today will be useful to anyone searching for pay for performance and what we can do with it. That's all. Thank you everyone for attending, and we can stay in touch. Any final words from others?
Maybe we can just remind that as a consortium, we are organizing a final conference that will take place in Brussels at the beginning of February. The dates are not yet scheduled, but of course the website and also our social media will be updated. So if you want to follow us soon, you will know about the exact dates, and we will be happy to meet you in person. And I think that's all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.